Buy my bike. Mommy needs money for food. The words tumbled from the lips of a 7-year-old blonde girl, her tiny hands trembling as she held a handmade cardboard sign. Arthur Stribling, millionaire CEO, had pulled his luxury BMW to the curb after witnessing an impossible scene: a child selling her pink bicycle on a residential street corner in Fresno. "How much do you want for your bicycle, sweetheart?" Arthur asked, still in shock. $50, sir, replied Barbara Watson, tears glistening in her blue eyes. "My mommy lost her job 3 weeks ago. I hear her crying every night. She told Grandma on the phone that we only have $18 left until she finds work." Arthur felt something crack inside his chest. That rose-colored bicycle with its daisy basket was clearly the little girl's most precious possession, and she was willing to sacrifice it for love. "What's your mother's name?" he asked, a strange sense of familiarity washing over him. "Amanda Watson. She used to work at some big computer company, but they fired her without explanation." The name hit Arthur like lightning. Amanda Watson. Why did that name sound so familiar? He didn't know yet, but he was about to discover a devastating truth that would change 3 lives forever. Without hesitation, Arthur pulled $300 from his wallet. "I think $300 is a fair price for such a special bicycle." That act of generosity was only the beginning of a story of love, redemption, and family that none of the 3 could ever imagine. What Arthur would discover about Amanda Watson in the coming hours would shake his world and reveal his company's biggest mistake. A story that proves miracles can begin with a simple pink bicycle. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. The first rays of dawn crept through the threadbare curtains of apartment 2B at Maple Gardens, a modest complex in the heart of Fresno, California. 7-year-old Barbara Watson had been awake for hours, her small body pressed against the thin bedroom wall that separated her from the living room, where she could hear her mother's muffled sobs. The sounds had become a nightly ritual over the past 3 weeks, ever since that terrible phone call that had changed everything. Barbara's blonde hair was tangled from tossing and turning, her blue eyes rimmed with the kind of worry that no child should carry. She clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, Mr. Whiskers, close to her chest as she listened to her mother Amanda's broken whispers into the phone. "I don't know what we're going to do, Mom. The rent is due Monday, and after buying groceries yesterday, I have exactly $18.37 left. I've applied to 15 jobs this week, and nobody will even call me back because of the termination on my record." The words pierced Barbara's innocent heart like shards of glass. She didn't fully understand what termination meant, but she knew it was the reason her beautiful, strong mother cried herself to sleep every night. She knew it was why they had been eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 nights in a row. She knew it was why her mother's green eyes, once so bright and full of laughter, now held a desperate sadness that made Barbara's chest hurt. As the morning sun painted golden stripes across her small bedroom floor, Barbara made a decision that would change not just her life, but the lives of 2 other people in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. She would sell her most precious possession, the pink bicycle with the wicker basket that her mother had saved for months to buy her for her 7th birthday just 8 months ago. The bicycle wasn't just any bike. It was a beautiful rose-colored Schwinn with a white wicker basket decorated with artificial daisies and pink streamers that danced in the wind when she rode. Her mother had found it at a second-hand shop and spent weeks restoring it, painting over scratches, replacing the worn seat with a new one covered in fabric with tiny butterflies, and adding the basket and streamers as a surprise. When Amanda had rolled it out on Barbara's birthday morning, both mother and daughter had cried tears of joy. Now, as Barbara carefully wheeled the bicycle down the narrow staircase of their apartment building, each step echoed with determination mixed with heartbreak. Her small hands shook as she gripped the handlebars, and more than once she had to stop to wipe away tears that threatened to blur her vision. But she pressed on, driven by a love so pure and selfless that it would have humbled angels. Barbara had spent most of the previous evening crafting a sign with markers and cardboard she had found in the recycling bin. In her careful 7-year-old handwriting she had written, "Selling my bike, Mommy needs money for food." She had decorated the corners with small hearts and flowers, not fully understanding that she was about to break her own heart to try to heal her mother's. Meanwhile, across town in the exclusive Fig Garden district of Fresno, 34-year-old Arthur Stribling stood in his expansive marble kitchen, the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of perfectly manicured gardens and a swimming pool that had never hosted a party or echoed with children's laughter. The kitchen itself was a masterpiece of modern design: granite countertops, stainless steel appliances that looked more like sculptures than functional items, and cabinets filled with expensive china that had never been used for a family meal. Arthur sipped his usual black coffee from a crystal mug worth more than most families spent on groceries in a month. At 34, he had built Stribling Technologies from a small startup in his garage into one of Fresno's most successful software companies, with clients spanning the globe and annual revenues in the hundreds of millions. Forbes had featured him on their 40 Under 40 list 3 years running, and his personal net worth exceeded $50 million. But success had come at a devastating cost. Arthur's 6,000-square-foot mansion felt more like a museum than a home, with its sterile white walls, minimalist furniture selected by an expensive interior designer, and rooms that echoed with emptiness rather than life. He had no friends, only business associates. He had no family, his parents having died in a car accident when he was 25, leaving him heir to their fortune but utterly alone in the world. He had never been in love, never felt the warmth of genuine human connection, never experienced the simple joy of sharing a meal with someone who cared about him as a person rather than as a business opportunity. Arthur's reflection in the hallway mirror showed a man who had everything money could buy: an Armani suit tailored to perfection, Italian leather shoes that cost more than many people's monthly rent, a Rolex watch that gleamed with cold precision on his wrist. But his dark brown eyes, which business magazines described as piercing and commanding, held a profound emptiness that no amount of wealth could fill. His phone buzzed insistently with notifications, emails about quarterly projections, meeting requests, urgent matters that demanded his immediate attention. Arthur barely glanced at them as he grabbed his BMW keys from the granite counter. In his world, everything was urgent, everything was critical, and everyone was expendable if they didn't meet his exacting standards. Just the previous week, Arthur had terminated 3 employees for failing to meet productivity targets. He had delivered the news with the same emotional detachment he might use to discuss quarterly earnings, viewing human resources as just that: resources to be optimized or discarded as business needs required. One of the terminated employees had been a woman whose name he couldn't even remember now. Something with a W. Williams? Watson? It didn't matter. In Arthur's carefully compartmentalized world, employees were numbers on spreadsheets, variables in profit equations, nothing more. As Arthur navigated his midnight blue BMW through the tree-lined streets of Fresno that Saturday morning, his mind was consumed with the usual calculations: market projections, competitor analysis, expansion strategies. He was taking his customary shortcut through the residential neighborhoods to avoid weekend traffic on his way to the office, where he planned to spend another solitary day reviewing reports and planning the next quarter's aggressive growth targets. The morning air was crisp and clear, typical of Fresno in early spring when the Central Valley awakened from its brief winter slumber. Joggers were already out on the sidewalks. Families were beginning to emerge from their homes for weekend activities, and the whole world seemed to pulse with life and connection, things that Arthur observed but had never truly experienced. That's when he saw her. Barbara Watson stood on the corner of Maple Street and Pine Avenue, her tiny figure almost dwarfed by the pink bicycle beside her. She had positioned herself strategically at the busiest intersection in the neighborhood, her handmade cardboard sign propped against the bike's frame. The sight was so unexpected, so heartbreakingly innocent, that Arthur found himself slowing down and pulling over to the curb before he had consciously decided to do so. As Arthur stepped out of his luxury vehicle, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the worn pavement, the contrast between his world and Barbara's became starkly apparent. Here was a man whose suit cost more than some families' monthly income, approaching a 7-year-old girl in faded jeans with patches on the knees and a t-shirt that had clearly seen better days. Barbara's blonde hair was pulled back in slightly lopsided pigtails secured with rubber bands rather than fancy hair accessories, and her small sneakers were scuffed from playground adventures. But what struck Arthur most was not the difference in their circumstances. It was the dignity with which this small child carried herself. Despite her obvious nervousness at seeing this imposing stranger approach, Barbara stood straight and tall, her chin raised with a pride that would have impressed royalty. Her blue eyes, though filled with apprehension, met his directly with an honesty that Arthur realized he hadn't encountered in years of business dealings. "Hello there, sweetheart," Arthur said, his voice automatically softening in a way that surprised him. He crouched down to Barbara's eye level, instinctively understanding that his height might be intimidating to such a small child. "What are you doing out here all by yourself?" Barbara clutched her sign a little tighter, her small voice barely above a whisper but steady with determination. "I'm selling my bicycle, sir. My mommy lost her job 3 weeks ago and we don't have money for food anymore. I heard her crying last night and she told my grandma on the phone that we only have $18 left until she finds work." The words hit Arthur like a physical blow. When was the last time he had spoken to a child? When was the last time anyone had looked at him with such innocent trust, such complete absence of agenda or manipulation? In his business world, every conversation was a negotiation, every relationship transactional. But this little girl was speaking to him with pure, unguarded honesty that cut through his carefully constructed emotional armor, like a knife through silk. "Your mother lost her job?" Arthur asked gently, though something about the situation was beginning to nag at the edges of his consciousness. "What's your mother's name, honey?" "Amanda Watson," Barbara replied, unconsciously swaying back and forth on her small feet in the way children do when they're nervous but trying to be brave. She used to work at some big company with computers. She really loved her job, and she was really good at it too. She helped people with their money problems and made sure everything added up right. But they fired her and she doesn't understand why. She cries every night when she thinks I'm sleeping, but I can hear her through the walls of our apartment. The name Amanda Watson hit Arthur's consciousness like a lightning bolt, sending shockwaves through his memory. Where had he heard that name before? Why did it sound so familiar? He studied Barbara's earnest face, noting the intelligence that sparkled in her bright blue eyes, the way she spoke with remarkable articulation and maturity for someone so young, the careful way she chose her words to explain a situation that was clearly beyond her full understanding. "She sounds like a wonderful mother," Arthur said carefully, his mind racing as he tried to place the name. "And you're out here trying to help her by selling your bicycle?" Barbara nodded solemnly, her small hand patting the bike's seat affectionately. "This is my most favorite thing in the whole world. Mommy saved money for months and months to buy it for my birthday. She found it at a special store and fixed it all up herself, painted it this pretty pink color and put on the basket with the flowers and everything. She worked so hard to make it perfect for me." Arthur felt something crack inside his chest, a sensation so foreign and unexpected that it actually made him gasp. Here was this beautiful, innocent child, willing to sacrifice the thing she loved most in the world to try to ease her mother's burden. The generosity of spirit, the selfless love, the courage it must have taken for someone so small to make such a decision. It was overwhelming. "How much do you want for your bicycle, sweetheart?" Arthur asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Barbara bit her lower lip, clearly having not thought this part through completely. She looked at her bike, then back at Arthur, her blue eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't really know, sir. Maybe $50? Is that too much? I just want to help my mommy so she doesn't have to cry anymore. $50 seems like a lot of money to me, but I don't know if it's enough to help with the food and the rent." Arthur felt his throat constrict with an emotion he couldn't name. This precious child was prepared to give up her most treasured possession for $50, an amount he probably spent on lunch without thinking about it. The innocence of her request, the hope in her voice, the way she spoke about wanting to stop her mother's tears, it was breaking down walls in his heart that he hadn't even realized he'd built. Reaching into his wallet, Arthur extracted 4 crisp $100 bills. The money meant nothing to him. He probably had more than that in loose change in his car's cup holders. But he knew that for this little girl and her mother, it might mean the difference between having a roof over their heads and sleeping on the street. I think $300 is a fair price for such a special bicycle, Arthur said gently, holding out the money. Barbara's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates, her small mouth falling open in absolute shock. She stared at the bills in Arthur's hand as if they were magical artifacts from another world. $300? But sir, that's so much money. Are you sure? I don't think my bike is worth that much. I'm absolutely certain, Arthur replied, his voice thick with emotion he was struggling to control. This bicycle is very special because it was loved by someone very special. And your mother is incredibly lucky to have such a caring, brave daughter. What happened next changed Arthur Stribling's life forever. Barbara, tears of pure joy streaming down her cheeks, threw her small arms around Arthur's neck in a hug that was brief but filled with such overwhelming gratitude and innocent affection that Arthur felt the last of his emotional walls crumble into dust. No one had hugged him in years. No one had touched him with genuine affection rather than calculated interest. The feeling of those small arms around his neck, the scent of children's shampoo in her hair, the warmth of her small body against his expensive suit. It awakened something in Arthur that he thought had died long ago. "Thank you, mister. Thank you so much," Barbara exclaimed, pulling back to beam at him through her tears. "Mommy is going to be so happy. We can buy groceries and pay the rent and maybe even get the electricity turned back on. You're like an angel." Before Arthur could respond, Barbara was already running toward the apartment building, the money clutched tightly in her small fist, her voice carrying back to him on the morning breeze. Mommy, come quick. The nicest man in the world bought my bike." Arthur stood alone on the sidewalk, staring at the pink bicycle with its cheerful daisy basket and fluttering streamers. The name Amanda Watson continued to echo in his mind like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. Somewhere in his memory, he knew that name, and the context was important. As he carefully loaded the bicycle into his BMW's spacious trunk, he couldn't shake the image of Barbara's tears of gratitude or the feeling of her small arms around his neck. For the first time in his adult life, Arthur Stribling drove home thinking about something other than business. That evening, Arthur sat in his home office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Fresno's skyline as the sun set behind the Sierra Nevada mountains in the distance. The office was a temple to his success, walls lined with awards and recognition plaques, a massive mahogany desk that had once belonged to a railroad baron, leather-bound first editions of business classics that he had read but never truly absorbed on an emotional level. But instead of reviewing the quarterly reports spread across his desk, Arthur found himself staring at Barbara's bicycle, which he had positioned in the corner of the room where he could see it. The pink paint seemed to glow in the lamplight, and the artificial daisies in the basket looked almost real in the soft illumination. Every time he looked at it, he heard Barbara's voice. Mommy saved money for months and months. She worked so hard to make it perfect for me. The name Amanda Watson had been haunting him all day, circling in his mind like a bird of prey. Finally, unable to concentrate on anything else, Arthur picked up his phone and called his human resources director, Jennifer Martinez, at her home number. "Jennifer, it's Arthur. I'm sorry to bother you on a Saturday evening, but I need you to pull an employee file for me first thing Monday morning. Amanda Watson, she was terminated recently." Jennifer's surprise was evident in her voice. "Mr. Stribling, is everything all right? It's unusual for you to call about personnel matters over the weekend. Just pull the file, Jennifer. I have some questions about her termination that need immediate answers." Arthur spent a restless weekend, his usual routine of solitary workouts, gourmet meals eaten alone, and hours of reading business journals completely disrupted by thoughts of a 7-year-old girl and her mother. He found himself researching single mother statistics, looking up information about unemployment in Fresno, even calling a local bicycle shop to ask about the restoration process for children's bikes. None of these activities made sense to him, but he couldn't seem to stop. Monday morning arrived with typical Central Valley sunshine, but Arthur was already in his office by 6 a.m., something that even surprised his dedicated assistant Margaret, who had been with the company for 12 years and thought she knew all of her boss's habits. When Jennifer Martinez knocked on his office door at exactly 8 a.m., Her expression was troubled. She carried a manila folder in her hands, and her usual confident demeanor seemed shaken. "Mr. Stribling, I have the Amanda Watson file you requested, but I'm afraid there's some very disturbing information I need to share with you." Arthur gestured for her to take a seat across from his desk, noting the way Jennifer clutched the folder as if it contained something toxic. "Tell me everything," Arthur commanded in his usual business tone, though his heart was beating faster than normal. Jennifer opened the folder with obvious reluctance. "Amanda Watson was employed with us for 3 years as a senior financial analyst. Her performance reviews were exemplary, consistently rated in the top 10% of her department. She never had any disciplinary issues, never missed deadlines, and her colleagues consistently praised her work ethic and attention to detail." Arthur frowned. "Then why was she terminated?" Jennifer's face went pale. "Sir, I'm afraid she was terminated by mistake. 3 weeks ago, we upgraded our HR software system. During the data migration, there was a glitch that confused employee ID numbers. Amanda Watson's ID was mixed up with Amanda Williams, who was being terminated for embezzlement. The termination order went out under Watson's name instead of Williams." The words hit Arthur like a freight train. He gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles turning white as the full magnitude of the error sank in. "Are you telling me that Amanda Watson was fired for someone else's crime?" "Yes, sir. Amanda Williams had been stealing from petty cash and falsifying expense reports. She was rightfully terminated. But the software glitch meant that Amanda Watson received the termination notice instead. By the time we realized the error, Watson had already been escorted from the building and her access cards deactivated. We sent her a termination letter citing financial misconduct that she never committed." Arthur felt physically ill. The room seemed to spin around him as he processed the devastating truth. He had unknowingly destroyed an innocent woman's career and livelihood, leaving her and her daughter in desperate poverty. The image of Barbara selling her bicycle, of Amanda crying herself to sleep every night, of a 7-year-old child taking on adult responsibilities to try to save her family. All of it was his fault. Why wasn't this error caught and corrected immediately? Arthur's voice was deadly quiet, the tone that made seasoned executives tremble. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Sir, Amanda Watson tried to contact HR multiple times to dispute the termination. She called, she emailed, she even came to the building trying to speak with someone about clearing up what she said was a mistake. But our policy is not to discuss terminated employees' records, and security was instructed not to allow her back on the premises. She was told all communication had to go through legal channels, which she couldn't afford to pursue." Arthur stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked downtown Fresno. Somewhere out there was the apartment building where Amanda Watson lived, where she struggled to feed her daughter, where she cried herself to sleep because his company had destroyed her life through careless incompetence. "Get me Amanda Watson's home address immediately," Arthur said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "And Jennifer, if word of this conversation leaves this room before I decide how to handle it, you'll be looking for new employment by lunchtime." "Yes, sir. I'll have the address for you within the hour." Arthur spent the rest of that Monday morning making discreet phone calls to attorneys, researching wrongful termination law, and trying to figure out how to undo the catastrophic damage his company had inflicted on an innocent family. But more than the legal implications, he was haunted by the memory of Barbara's innocent face, her willingness to sacrifice everything for her mother's welfare, and the knowledge that he was responsible for putting them in that desperate situation. The next morning, Arthur stood outside the Maple Gardens apartment complex, holding a large bouquet of white roses and feeling more nervous than he had during his first board meeting or his first television interview. The building was a far cry from his luxurious neighborhood, a modest 2-story structure with paint peeling from the exterior walls, a small playground with equipment that had seen better days, and parking lot filled with cars that were held together more by hope and determination than mechanical integrity. But there was something about the place that Arthur's wealthy neighborhood lacked: signs of actual life, children's bicycles chained to the stair railings, colorful wind chimes hanging from balconies, flower boxes in windows where residents had tried to add beauty to their modest surroundings. It was clear that people lived here, really lived here, in ways that his sterile mansion had never been lived in. Arthur climbed the stairs to the second floor, his expensive shoes echoing on the concrete steps. Apartment 2B had a small welcome mat decorated with sunflowers and a wreath made of silk flowers hanging on the door, touches that spoke of someone who took pride in creating a home, regardless of economic circumstances. When Amanda Watson opened the door, Arthur was struck speechless. Even in her worn jeans and oversized sweater with her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and exhaustion evident in her green eyes, she was breathtakingly beautiful. But it wasn't just her physical beauty that stopped him cold. It was something in her face, a strength and resilience that spoke of a woman who had weathered storms that would have broken lesser people. There was dignity in the way she carried herself, grace in her movements despite the obvious stress she was under, and intelligence that sparkled in her eyes even through her fatigue. "Can I help you?" Amanda asked cautiously, her voice carrying the wariness of someone who had learned to be suspicious of unexpected visitors. She instinctively positioned herself protectively in the doorway, and Arthur realized she was shielding the apartment's interior from his view. "Ms. Watson, my name is Arthur Stribling. I'm the CEO of Stribling Technologies, and I believe we need to talk." Amanda's face went ashen, her hand gripping the doorframe for support. Arthur watched her green eyes fill with a mixture of fear, anger, and something that might have been hope, though she was clearly trying to suppress it. "If this is about the termination settlement papers, I already signed them," Amanda said, her voice carefully controlled. "I'm not looking for any trouble. I just want to find work and take care of my daughter." "No, Ms. Watson, you don't understand," Arthur said quickly, noting the way her voice shook slightly despite her attempt to sound composed. "I'm not here about settlement papers. I'm here because my company made a terrible, inexcusable mistake. You should never have been fired. Your termination was completely erroneous." Before Amanda could respond, a small voice called out from inside the apartment. "Mommy, who's at the door?" Barbara appeared at her mother's side, and her face immediately lit up with recognition and delight. "Mommy, it's the nice man who bought my bike, the one who gave me all that money." Arthur watched Amanda's eyes widen as the pieces clicked together in her mind. This was the mysterious buyer her daughter had told her about, the man who had appeared like an answer to prayer and paid an extraordinary sum for Barbara's old bicycle. But he was also the CEO of the company that had destroyed their lives. The conflicting emotions played across her expressive face like weather patterns across a landscape. "You're the one who bought Barbara's bicycle?" Amanda asked, her voice filled with confusion and something that might have been the beginning of understanding. "Yes, and I'd very much like to explain why. May I come in? I think we have a great deal to discuss." Amanda hesitated for a moment, her protective instincts warring with curiosity, and the desperate hope that maybe, somehow, this unexpected visit might mean salvation for her and Barbara. Finally, she stepped aside and gestured for Arthur to enter. Amanda's small living room told the story of their struggles without a single word being spoken. The furniture was clean but worn, obviously second-hand but cared for with the kind of attention that comes from knowing you can't afford to replace anything. Children's books were carefully organized on makeshift shelves constructed from wooden crates and boards, and the walls were decorated with Barbara's colorful drawings rather than expensive artwork. A small television sat on a folding table, and the coffee table was actually an old trunk covered with a hand-sewn cloth. Despite the modesty of their circumstances, the apartment radiated warmth and love in a way Arthur's mansion never had. Every surface showed evidence of a mother's care. Hand-knitted throws draped over the furniture, fresh flowers from the complex's garden arranged in a mason jar, photographs of Barbara at various ages displayed prominently on every available surface. This was a home in the truest sense of the word, a place where love lived and grew despite financial hardship. Arthur felt enormous and out of place in the intimate space, like a giant who had stumbled into a dollhouse. He perched uncomfortably on the edge of the small couch, acutely aware of how much his suit probably cost compared to everything else in the room combined. Amanda sat across from him in a chair that had been positioned to get the best light from the window for reading, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. Barbara settled on the floor nearby with a coloring book and a coffee can full of crayons, but Arthur could tell she was listening to every word, despite her apparent focus on her artwork. "Ms. Watson," Arthur began, his voice heavy with regret, I owe you the most profound apology it's possible for one human being to offer another. Your termination was the result of a software error during an HR system upgrade. You were confused with another employee who was being fired for embezzlement. You should never have lost your job. Amanda stared at him for a long moment, processing the information. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely controlled, trembling with months of suppressed emotion. "Do you have any idea what these past 3 weeks have been like for us?" she asked, and Arthur could see her hands shaking in her lap. "Do you know what it's like to be escorted from your workplace like a criminal? To have security guards watch while you pack your personal belongings into a cardboard box? To walk past colleagues who won't meet your eyes because they think you're a thief?" Arthur felt each word like a physical blow, but he forced himself to maintain eye contact, to bear witness to the pain his company had caused. Amanda continued, her voice growing stronger with anger. "I've applied for 63 jobs in 3 weeks. 63. Do you know how many interviews I've gotten? 2. And both of them ended the moment they called for references and heard about my termination for financial misconduct. My daughter has been eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner because I can't afford anything else. We've had our electricity turned off twice. The landlord has already served us with an eviction notice." Arthur watched tears gather in Amanda's eyes, though she refused to let them fall in front of him. Her pride was evident even in her pain, and it made his chest ache with admiration and guilt in equal measure. "My 7-year-old daughter sold her most precious possession because she heard me crying and wanted to help," Amanda continued. "She stood on a street corner trying to sacrifice the thing she loved most in the world because your company destroyed my reputation and left us with nothing." Barbara looked up from her coloring book, her blue eyes serious. "I heard Mommy talking to Grandma on the phone. She said we might have to go live in our car if she doesn't find a job soon." The innocence of Barbara's statement, delivered matter-of-factly as she continued coloring a picture of a house with a white picket fence, nearly broke Arthur's heart. This beautiful child had been living with the very adult fear of homelessness, and it was his fault. "I want to make this right," Arthur said earnestly, leaning forward in his chair. "I'd like to offer you your position back with a 30% salary increase as compensation for our error and the hardship it's caused. You'll also receive full back pay for the 3 weeks you were wrongfully unemployed, plus additional compensation for the emotional distress this situation has caused." Amanda was quiet for several minutes, staring at her hands folded in her lap. When she looked up, there was something fierce in her eyes that reminded Arthur of a lioness protecting her cub. "Why should I trust you?" she asked bluntly. "How do I know this isn't just another corporate game, that you won't fire me again the moment it becomes convenient? How do I know you're not just trying to avoid a wrongful termination lawsuit?" Arthur had never had his integrity questioned so directly, and strangely, he found himself respecting Amanda more for it. In his business world, people told him what they thought he wanted to hear. This woman was speaking truth to power, demanding accountability from someone who held her family's future in his hands. "Because," Arthur said slowly, choosing his words carefully. 3 days ago, I had never looked into the eyes of a 7-year-old girl selling her bicycle to help her mother pay for food, knowing that my company was responsible for putting her in that position. Because I've never had to face the consequences of treating employees like disposable resources rather than human beings with families who depend on them. Because I've never felt this ashamed of my actions in my entire life." Barbara looked up from her coloring book again. "You seem really sad, Mr. Arthur. Are you okay?" The simple question, asked with such genuine concern by the child he had inadvertently hurt, nearly undid Arthur completely. "I'm sad because my company hurt you and your mommy, sweetheart, but I'm going to do everything I can to make it better." "I like you," Barbara announced with the straightforward honesty of childhood. "You were really nice to me when you bought my bike, and you gave me enough money to help Mommy. You don't seem mean like a person who would hurt people on purpose." Amanda studied Arthur's face intently, searching for any sign of deception or manipulation. What she saw instead was genuine remorse and something else, a loneliness that somehow mirrored her own, though she couldn't understand how someone so wealthy and successful could possibly understand what loneliness felt like. "All right, Mr. Stribling," Amanda said finally. "I'll consider your offer, but I have conditions." "Name them." I want a written guarantee of employment for at least 2 years, not just one. I want to report directly to you rather than going through HR, since they clearly can't be trusted to handle personnel matters competently. And I want your personal assurance that my daughter and I will be treated with respect and dignity by everyone in your organization. Arthur nodded without hesitation. Done, all of it. When can you start? Monday morning. And Mr. Stribling, I want the truth about what happened documented in writing, with copies sent to the State Labor Board and the Better Business Bureau. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. Absolutely. You have my word. As Arthur prepared to leave, Barbara tugged gently on his expensive suit sleeve. Mr. Stribling, do you still have my bike? Arthur smiled, the first genuine smile Amanda had seen from him since he'd arrived. Yes, I do, sweetheart. I'm taking very good care of it. That's good, Barbara said solemnly. I miss it sometimes, but I'm glad I could help Mommy. Maybe someday when we have more money saved up, I could visit it. I'd like to see how it's doing. Arthur's heart clenched at the innocent request. This remarkable child was worried about her bicycle's well-being, as if it were a pet she'd had to give away. Maybe we can work something out even better than that, he said softly. Over the following weeks, something entirely unexpected began to develop between Arthur and the Watson family. What had started as guilt-driven obligation slowly evolved into something Arthur had never experienced before, genuine friendship, and perhaps something even deeper that he wasn't ready to name. Arthur found himself stopping by their apartment after work, initially under the pretense of checking on Amanda's transition back to work and ensuring that she and Barbara were settling into their improved circumstances. But the truth was more complicated and more profound than simple guilt management. For the first time in his adult life, Arthur was experiencing what it felt like to be part of a family. Amanda would insist he stay for dinner, serving simple meals of homemade soup, fresh bread and salads made from vegetables. She grew in small pots on their tiny balcony. The food was nothing like the gourmet cuisine he was accustomed to, but it tasted better than anything he'd ever eaten because it was prepared with love and shared with people who genuinely cared about his well-being. Barbara would regale him with detailed stories about her day at school, her excitement about a good grade on a spelling test, her concerns about a friend who was being bullied, her dreams of becoming a veterinarian so she could help sick animals. She would show him her homework assignments, beam with pride when he praised her artwork, and gradually begin to treat him less like a mysterious adult visitor and more like a beloved family member. For Amanda, Arthur's presence was initially unsettling. She had built walls around herself and Barbara after Mike's abandonment during her pregnancy, determined to prove that she could handle everything alone, that she didn't need anyone else to make their small family complete. But Arthur's genuine interest in their daily lives, his patience with Barbara's endless questions, and his unexpected vulnerability began to chip away at her carefully constructed defenses. You don't have to keep checking on us, Amanda said one evening as Arthur helped Barbara with her math homework at their small kitchen table. The sight of this powerful, wealthy man patiently explaining long division to a 7-year-old, his expensive tie loosened and his suit jacket draped over a kitchen chair, was both endearing and disconcerting. We're doing fine now. Better than fine, actually. Arthur looked up from Barbara's worksheet, where he had been drawing little pictures to help her understand the concept of remainders. I know I don't have to. I want to. There was something in his voice, a quiet honesty that made Amanda study his face more carefully. Beneath his polished exterior, she was beginning to see glimpses of the man he might have been if circumstances had been different, kind, thoughtful, even playful, when Barbara convinced him to participate in elaborate tea parties with her collection of stuffed animals. Why? Amanda asked quietly, genuinely curious. Why do you care so much about what happens to us? Arthur was quiet for a long moment, watching Barbara carefully erase a wrong answer and try the problem again with her tongue poking out in concentration. When he spoke, his voice carried a vulnerability that Amanda had never heard from him before. Because I've spent my entire adult life building walls around myself, convinced that success meant not needing anyone, Arthur said slowly. I thought that if I could accumulate enough wealth, enough power, enough recognition, I would feel fulfilled. But sitting here with you and Barbara, seeing how much love exists in this small apartment despite all the challenges you've faced, I realize I've never actually lived. I've just existed. Amanda felt something shift in her chest at his raw honesty. This powerful, intimidating man was revealing a side of himself that she suspected few people ever saw. My father was a successful businessman, Arthur continued, his fingers absently straightening Barbara's pencils while he spoke. He built his fortune by treating everyone in his life as either an asset or a liability. Employees were resources to be optimized. Family relationships were networks to be leveraged. Even my mother was more of a trophy wife than a partner. He taught me that emotions were weaknesses that successful men couldn't afford. Barbara looked up from her math problem. That sounds lonely, Mr. Arthur. Arthur's smile was tinged with sadness. It was very lonely, sweetheart. I spent so many years following his example that I forgot how to connect with people. I built my company using his methods, treating employees like numbers on spreadsheets instead of human beings with families and dreams and fears. But you're not like that now, Barbara said with the confident certainty of childhood. You help me with homework and you make Mommy smile when she cooks dinner. You're nice. Arthur felt tears prick at his eyes, and sensation so foreign he almost didn't recognize it. Being here with you and your mom is teaching me what I've been missing my whole life. When I saw you on that street corner, when I realized what my coldness had cost your family, something inside me broke open. I don't want to be that person anymore. Amanda reached across the small table and placed her hand over Arthur's, surprising them both with the gesture. You're not that person, she said softly. That person wouldn't have stopped to help a little girl selling her bicycle. That person wouldn't have spent weeks making sure we were okay. That person wouldn't be sitting in our kitchen helping with homework instead of working late in some corporate office. The touch of Amanda's hand on his sent warmth spreading up Arthur's arm and into his chest. He turned his palm up so their fingers could intertwine, marveling at how perfectly her hand fit in his. You've both changed my life, Arthur whispered. I used to think my mansion was impressive because it was big and expensive. But it's not a home. It's just a building. He gestured around their modest kitchen. This is what a home feels like. As the weeks passed, their unusual friendship deepened into something none of them had expected. Arthur began spending entire weekends with Amanda and Barbara, helping with grocery shopping, attending Barbara's soccer games, and participating in the simple domestic rituals that made up their lives. He learned to cook alongside Amanda, taught Barbara to play chess, and discovered the profound satisfaction that came from being needed and wanted for who he was, rather than what he could provide. For Amanda, watching Arthur transform from the intimidating CEO who had first appeared at her door into someone gentle and caring was like watching a flower bloom in time-lapse photography. She began to see past his wealth and power to the lonely man underneath, someone who had never learned how to be part of a family but was eager to learn. Barbara, with the adaptability of childhood, simply absorbed Arthur into their family structure, as if he had always been there. She began saving her best artwork to show him, asking his opinion on important 7-year-old decisions, and unconsciously beginning to treat him like the father figure that had been missing from her life. One Saturday evening in late October, as they sat together on Amanda's couch watching Barbara's favorite movie, Arthur made a quiet observation that changed everything. I've been thinking about something Barbara said a few weeks ago, he said, his arm around Amanda's shoulders as she leaned against him. She asked me why I seemed sad, and I realized that I've spent so many years being numb that I'd forgotten the difference between sadness and emptiness. Amanda tilted her head to look at him. What's the difference? Sadness means you're capable of feeling joy. Emptiness means you've given up on both. These months with you and Barbara have taught me that I was empty, not sad. But now, he paused, searching for words. Now I feel everything. Joy when Barbara shows me a good grade. Contentment when we cook dinner together. Pride when I watch you handle difficult situations with such grace. And something else, something I've never felt before. What? Amanda whispered. Arthur turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense with emotion. Love. I love you, Amanda. I love you and I love Barbara. And I can't imagine my life without both of you in it anymore. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest, and terrifying in its implications. Amanda's breath caught in her throat as she processed his words. Arthur, she breathed, her hand coming up to touch his face. I know it's complicated, Arthur continued quickly, as if afraid she might stop him. I know my feelings might make things difficult for you at work, and I know you have every reason to be cautious about trusting someone with your heart. But I had to tell you the truth. These past months with you and Barbara have been the happiest of my entire life. Amanda studied his face, seeing the vulnerability and hope and fear all mixed together in his expression. This powerful man was laying his heart bare, risking rejection from someone who had every reason to keep her emotional distance. I love you too, she whispered finally, and watched relief flood across his features. I've been trying so hard not to, trying to protect myself and Barbara from the possibility of getting hurt again. But I can't help it. You've become everything to us. Their first kiss was soft and tentative, years of loneliness and carefully constructed walls finally crumbling. When they broke apart, both had tears in their eyes. Look! Barbara's excited voice made them turn toward the window. It's snowing. Indeed, the first snow of the season was beginning to fall outside, dusting the apartment complex courtyard with white. Barbara pressed her face against the glass, her breath fogging the window as she watched the flakes dance in the light from the parking lot lamps. Can we go outside and catch snowflakes? Barbara asked, bouncing with excitement. Arthur and Amanda exchanged a look filled with love and possibility. Of course, sweetheart, Amanda said. Let's get our coats. As they bundled up in their winter clothes, Arthur borrowing one of Amanda's oversized sweaters since he hadn't come prepared for snow, Barbara chattered excitedly about making snow angels and having a snowball fight. But it was the sight of Arthur and Amanda holding hands as they followed her outside that would become one of Barbara's most treasured memories. They spent an hour in the courtyard, building a small snowman with buttons made from pebbles and a scarf that Arthur gallantly donated from his own neck. Barbara laughed as she tried to catch snowflakes on her tongue, and Arthur surprised them both by initiating a gentle snowball fight that left all three of them covered in white and breathless with laughter. When they finally returned to the warmth of the apartment, their cheeks red from cold and their hearts full of joy, Arthur helped Amanda make hot chocolate while Barbara changed into warm pajamas. As they sat together on the couch, sharing the warm drinks and watching the snow continue to fall outside, Arthur realized that this simple evening contained more genuine happiness than all his business successes combined. But their newfound happiness was about to face its greatest test. It was a cold February morning when Mike Rodriguez appeared at Amanda's door without warning. At 28, Mike still possessed the boyish charm and easy smile that had attracted Amanda during their college years, but there was something different about him now. His clothes were more expensive than Amanda remembered him ever wearing, his hair was professionally styled, and he carried himself with a confidence that spoke of recent success. But beneath the polished exterior, Amanda could see something desperate in his brown eyes, a hunger that made her instinctively step back. "Hello, Amanda," Mike said, his voice smooth and practiced, as if he'd rehearsed this moment. "You look beautiful. Motherhood suits you." Amanda's blood turned to ice at the sight of him. 8 years of carefully constructed stability suddenly felt fragile, like a house of cards in a windstorm. "What are you doing here, Mike? You have no right to show up at my door unannounced." "Come on, don't be like that," Mike replied, his smile never wavering as he pushed past her into the apartment. Amanda noticed he was taking in everything, the modest but comfortable furnishings, the family photos on the walls, the evidence of a life built without him. "I heard through some mutual friends from college that you're doing well now. Got your job back at some big tech company, moved into a better neighborhood. I thought maybe it was time we talked about being a family again." "A family?" Amanda's voice rose with incredulous anger. "You walked out on me when I was 6 months pregnant, Mike. You said you weren't ready to be a father, that a baby would ruin your chances of success. You have no right to use that word." Before Mike could respond, Barbara appeared in the living room doorway, still in her pajamas and clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. She stopped when she saw the stranger, her intuitive child's radar immediately picking up on the tension in the room. "Mommy?" Barbara said uncertainly. "Who is this?" Amanda's heart broke at having to make this introduction. "Barbara, sweetheart, this is Mike Rodriguez. He's your biological father." Barbara tilted her head, studying Mike with the careful assessment children use when they sense adult emotions they don't understand. There was no recognition in her eyes, no spark of connection. This man was a complete stranger to her. "Are you the one who went away when I was in Mommy's tummy?" Barbara asked with startling directness. Mike's confident expression faltered for the first time. "I was young back then, baby girl. I made some mistakes, but I'm here now and I want to make it up to you and your mom. I've got a good job now, a nice apartment in Los Angeles. I can provide for both of you the way you deserve." Barbara processed this information with the serious consideration she gave to all important matters. "I don't need you to make anything up to me," she said finally. "Arthur takes care of us now. He reads me bedtime stories and helps with my homework and never makes Mommy cry. He's my real daddy." The words hit Mike like a physical blow, and Amanda saw his charming facade crack completely. "Arthur? Who the hell is Arthur?" "Arthur Stribling is my boss and our friend," Amanda said carefully, not wanting to reveal the depth of their relationship to Mike. "He's been very good to us." Mike's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Your boss? Come on, Amanda, I'm not stupid. You're sleeping with your rich boss, aren't you? Using our daughter to secure yourself a comfortable life with some CEO sugar daddy?" "How dare you?" Amanda said, her voice deadly quiet with controlled rage. "You have absolutely no right to judge my life or my choices. You left us, Mike. You chose to abandon your pregnant girlfriend and your unborn child because responsibility was inconvenient for you. You don't get to come back 8 years later and pretend to care about Barbara's welfare. I'm her father, Amanda," Mike said, his voice turning ugly and threatening. "Her biological father. I have legal rights whether you like it or not. Maybe it's time I started exercising them. A court might be very interested to hear about your living arrangement with this Arthur guy." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Amanda felt her knees go weak as the implications crashed down on her. Mike could potentially file for custody, could disrupt the stable, loving life she had built for Barbara, could destroy the fragile happiness they had found with Arthur. Barbara, sensing the adult tension, even if she didn't fully understand it, moved closer to her mother and slipped her small hand into Amanda's. "Mommy, I don't like him," she whispered. "He's making you scared." That evening, when Arthur arrived for their usual dinner together, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. Amanda was pale and distracted, barely touching her food, while Barbara clung to his side more tightly than usual and kept shooting nervous glances toward the door, as if she expected the unpleasant stranger to return. "What's happened?" Arthur asked quietly after Barbara had been settled in her room with a book and her stuffed animals. Amanda told him about Mike's unexpected return, his threats about custody, his implications about their relationship, and his obvious interest in her improved financial situation. As she spoke, Arthur felt a rage building in his chest, unlike anything he had ever experienced. Not the cold anger of business conflicts, but the fierce protective fury of a man whose family was being threatened. "He can't take Barbara away from you," Arthur said with quiet intensity. "I won't let that happen." "You don't understand," Amanda said, tears finally spilling over as the day's stress overwhelmed her composure. "He's her biological father. Even though he abandoned us, the courts might side with him, especially if he can paint me as an unfit mother who's living with a man she's not married to. He talked about having a good job in Los Angeles, being able to provide for her. What if a judge thinks she'd be better off with him?" Arthur took Amanda's trembling hands in his, feeling how cold they were despite the warmth of the apartment. "Amanda, look at me. Barbara belongs with you. You're an incredible mother. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you can see how much you love her, how much she loves you. No court in the world would take a child away from a loving, stable home to give her to someone who abandoned her. But what if it's not enough?" Amanda whispered. What if his lawyers are better than mine? What if he takes her away and I never see her again? Arthur pulled Amanda into his arms, feeling her shake with suppressed sobs against his chest. The thought of losing Barbara, of this beautiful child being forced to live with a man who saw her as a pawn in some twisted game, was unbearable. Then we fight him, Arthur said firmly. Together. I'll hire the best family lawyers in the state if I have to. I'll spend every penny I own to make sure Barbara stays where she belongs. With you, with us. Why would you do that for us? Amanda asked, her voice muffled against his shirt. Arthur pulled back so he could look into her eyes. Because I love you both more than my own life. Because Barbara is as much my daughter as if I'd been there from the moment she was born. Because this family, our family, is the most important thing in the world to me. Amanda reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. I'm scared, Arthur. I can't lose her. She's everything to me. You won't lose her, Arthur promised, his voice fierce with determination. I swear to you, Amanda, on everything I hold sacred, you will not lose her. The custody battle that followed was more brutal and emotionally devastating than anything Amanda could have imagined. Mike had hired an aggressive attorney who specialized in high-conflict family law, and their strategy was to paint Amanda as an opportunistic woman who was using her daughter to manipulate a wealthy man. They questioned her fitness as a mother, her morals, her motives, and her living arrangements in ways that left Amanda feeling violated and exposed. The court proceedings stretched on for weeks, each session more emotionally draining than the last. Mike's lawyer brought up every aspect of Amanda's life. Her financial struggles before Arthur, her single motherhood, her termination from Stribling Technologies, though they conveniently omitted the fact that it had been erroneous, and her relationship with Arthur. They painted a picture of a woman who was unstable, opportunistic, and willing to expose her daughter to inappropriate adult relationships for financial gain. Arthur hired the most prestigious family law firm in California, sparing no expense in Amanda's defense. Their legal team was led by Margaret Chen, a renowned attorney who specialized in protecting mothers' rights in custody disputes. They methodically built a case demonstrating Amanda's exemplary parenting, her stable home environment, and Barbara's obvious happiness and well-being. Character witnesses testified on Amanda's behalf. Teachers who spoke about Barbara's academic success and emotional stability. Neighbors who had observed Amanda's dedicated parenting over the years, and colleagues who vouched for her integrity and work ethic. Even Arthur's own employees came forward to testify about the positive changes they had observed in their CEO since he had become part of the Watson family's life. But the most powerful testimony came from Dr. Sarah Martinez, a child psychologist who had been appointed by the court to evaluate Barbara's best interests. After spending hours interviewing Barbara, observing her interactions with both Amanda and Arthur, and reviewing her school records and medical history, Dr. Martinez painted a clear picture of a happy, well-adjusted child who thrived in her current environment. Barbara Watson is one of the most emotionally secure children I've encountered in 20 years of practice, Dr. Martinez testified. She has a strong attachment to her mother, excellent academic performance, healthy social relationships, and clear communication skills. Most importantly, she has formed a significant bond with Mr. Stribling, whom she consistently refers to as her daddy, and who clearly fulfills a crucial parental role in her life. The turning point in the case came when Barbara herself was interviewed by the family court counselor. Despite her young age, the 8-year-old displayed remarkable maturity and clarity about her own feelings and preferences. I don't want to live with the man who went away, Barbara told the counselor with impressive poise. He's not my daddy. Arthur is my daddy. He never went away, not even once. He reads me stories and helps me with my homework and takes me to soccer practice. When I have bad dreams, he comes to my room and sits with me until I feel safe again. When asked about her feelings toward Mike, Barbara was thoughtful but firm. He seems nice, I guess, but he makes my mommy cry and that makes me sad. Arthur makes my mommy happy. And when she's happy, I'm happy too. The counselor asked if Barbara would want to spend time with Mike, perhaps on weekends or holidays. Barbara considered this seriously before shaking her head. No, thank you. I want to stay with my real family. Arthur and Mommy and me. We're a family. The other man is just a stranger who happened to be there when I was born. Mike's case began to crumble when it became clear that his sudden interest in fatherhood coincided suspiciously with his discovery of Amanda's improved financial situation. Under cross-examination, he admitted that he had made no attempt to contact Amanda or provide any support for Barbara during the 8 years since her birth. His claims of wanting to be a father rang hollow when weighed against his complete absence from his daughter's life. The final blow came when Margaret Chen presented evidence of Mike's real motivations. Private investigators had discovered that Mike was facing significant financial difficulties in Los Angeles, including mounting credit card debt and the recent loss of his job. His interest in gaining custody appeared to be primarily motivated by a desire to access Arthur's wealth through child support payments rather than genuine concern for Barbara's welfare. Judge Patricia Williams, a veteran family court judge with 30 years of experience, delivered her ruling with clarity and conviction. In determining the best interests of the child, this court must consider not only biological relationships, but also the stability, love, and commitment that adults provide to a child's life. While Mr. Rodriguez is indeed Barbara's biological father, he voluntarily relinquished any claim to that relationship when he abandoned Ms. Watson during her pregnancy and made no effort to be part of his daughter's life for 8 years. In contrast, Ms. Watson has provided Barbara with a loving, stable home environment, excellent care, and clear evidence of putting her daughter's needs first in all circumstances. Mr. Stribling, while not the biological father, has clearly assumed a parental role in Barbara's life and has formed a significant bond with the child that serves her emotional and developmental needs. This court finds that Barbara's best interests are served by remaining in her current living situation with her mother. Mr. Rodriguez's petition for custody is denied. He will be granted supervised visitation rights for 2 hours every other Saturday, contingent upon Barbara's willingness to participate and subject to review after 6 months. Outside the courthouse, as Mike stormed away with his attorney, Arthur wrapped his arms around Amanda and Barbara, holding them close as they all cried tears of relief and gratitude. "It's over," Arthur whispered into Amanda's hair. "You're safe. We're all safe. No one can separate our family." Barbara looked up at both adults with the wisdom of a child who had been through something difficult but emerged stronger. "We were always going to be okay," she said matter-of-factly. "We have each other, and that's what families do. They stay together." That evening, as they sat in their apartment, the three of them together again, safe and secure in their love for each other, Arthur made a decision that had been building in his heart for weeks. "Amanda, Barbara," he said, his voice serious but warm, "I have something very important to ask you both." Barbara looked up from her homework, sensing the significance of the moment. "What is it, Arthur?" Arthur took a deep breath, feeling more nervous than he ever had during any business presentation or board meeting. "How would you both feel about all of us living together permanently? Not just visits and dinners, but really being a family, sharing a home, building a life together?" Barbara's squeal of excitement could probably be heard throughout the entire apartment complex. "Really? We could all live together every day, in your big house with the swimming pool and the library?" Arthur laughed, the sound rich with love and hope. "Really? If your mom says yes, I'd like nothing more than to wake up every morning with both of you." He turned to Amanda, his dark eyes shining with vulnerability and hope. "Amanda, I know we haven't been together in the traditional sense for very long, but these months have shown me what real love feels like, what family means, what home actually is. I want to be Barbara's father in every way that matters. I want to be your partner in raising her and building a life together and facing whatever challenges come our way. Will you both take a chance on forever with me?" Amanda's answer was written in her tears, her radiant smile, and the way she kissed him with Barbara giggling and cheering between them. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes to everything. Yes to family. Yes to forever. Yes to building a beautiful life together." 3 months later, moving trucks lined up outside the Maple Gardens apartment complex as Amanda and Barbara prepared to leave the small home that had sheltered so much love and struggle. Arthur had insisted on hiring professional movers to handle everything, but Amanda wanted to pack Barbara's room herself, carefully wrapping each precious belonging for the journey to their new life. Arthur's mansion had been completely transformed in preparation for their arrival. What had once been a sterile showplace now buzzed with life and warmth. Walls that had previously displayed expensive but impersonal artwork now showcased Barbara's colorful drawings and family photographs. The formal dining room had been converted into a comfortable family space with a large table where they could eat meals together, help with homework, and play board games. Barbara's new bedroom was beyond her wildest dreams. Painted in her favorite shade of purple, with a reading nook by the window, built-in shelves for her growing book collection, and a desk where she could do homework and create art. But her favorite addition was the family room Arthur had created, with comfortable sofas arranged around a fireplace and large windows overlooking the backyard where they would gather every evening. The backyard itself had been completely redesigned with a playground area, a vegetable garden that Amanda could tend, and plenty of space for Barbara to ride her bicycle when Arthur returned it to her. The swimming pool that had once been just another expensive amenity now featured safety fencing and child-friendly additions, ready to become the center of family fun and Barbara's swimming lessons. As they carried the last boxes from their old apartment, Barbara paused on the stairs and looked back at the door marked 2B. "I'm going to miss this place," she said thoughtfully. "It was a good home for us, wasn't it, Mommy?" Amanda felt tears prick her eyes as she looked around the courtyard where Barbara had learned to ride her first bicycle, where they had built snowmen during that magical first snowfall with Arthur, where they had struggled and survived and ultimately thrived. "It was a wonderful home, sweetheart. It kept us safe and gave us a place to love each other. But now we're ready for our next adventure." "Will we ever come back and visit?" Barbara asked. Arthur, who had been loading the final box into his car, came over and knelt down beside Barbara. "We can visit whenever you want to, sweetheart. This place will always be special, because it's where our family really began, where I met you and your mom, where we learned to love each other." Barbara nodded solemnly, then suddenly brightened. "And it's where I learned that sometimes when you give up something you love, you get something even better back. Right, Arthur?" Arthur's throat tightened with emotion as he remembered that first morning when Barbara had stood on the corner, willing to sacrifice her most precious possession for her mother's welfare. "That's exactly right, Barbara. Sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most difficult moments." As they drove through Fresno toward their new home, their real home, the place where they would build their future together, Barbara chattered excitedly about all the things she wanted to do in their new house. She wanted to help Arthur plant flowers in the garden, learn to swim in the pool, and maybe get a puppy to keep them company. "Can we have a dog, Arthur?" "Please?" Barbara asked, bouncing in her car seat. "I've always wanted a puppy, but our apartment didn't allow pets." Arthur caught Amanda's eye in the rearview mirror and saw her laughing at Barbara's enthusiasm. "I think a puppy sounds like a wonderful addition to our family," he said. "But first, let's get settled in our new house. Then we can go to the animal shelter and find the perfect dog for us." "This is the best day ever," Barbara declared, and both adults had to agree. Spring melted into a glorious summer as the Stribling Watson family settled into their new life together. Arthur discovered the profound joy of domestic routine: family breakfasts before Barbara's day camp, evening swims in their pool, weekend trips to farmers markets and local festivals. He learned to braid Barbara's hair for soccer practice, mastered the art of making her favorite pancakes, and became expert at reading bedtime stories with all the proper character voices. Amanda found herself transforming as well, blooming in the security and love that Arthur provided. Her natural warmth and intelligence flourished as she no longer carried the burden of single parenthood alone. She returned to school part-time to pursue her MBA, something she had always dreamed of, but never had the resources or time to achieve. Arthur supported her studies completely, adjusting his own schedule to ensure Barbara was never without a parent present. But it was Barbara who made the most remarkable transformation. Secure in the knowledge that she was loved and wanted by both of her parents, she blossomed into a confident, joyful child who excelled in school, made friends easily, and approached life with optimism and curiosity. The worried little girl who had once stood on a street corner trying to save her family was replaced by a happy child who knew without question that she was treasured and safe. As Barbara's 8th birthday approached in late spring, Arthur had been secretly planning something special. The pink bicycle that had brought them all together had been carefully stored in his garage, and over the past several months, he had been working with a custom restoration specialist to transform it into something extraordinary. The bike had been completely rebuilt from the ground up. The frame was stripped down to bare metal and repainted in Barbara's favorite shade of pink, but now it gleamed with automotive-grade paint that would never fade or chip. New chrome components replaced every piece of hardware, polished to mirror brightness. The wheels were rebuilt with premium spokes and fitted with white wall tires that looked like something from a classic American dream. The wicker basket was completely restored and reinforced, then filled with fresh silk daisies in white and yellow. New handlebar streamers in pink and white fluttered like celebration banners. A comfortable new seat was upholstered in pink leather with white stitching, and chrome fenders were added to protect Barbara from splashes when she rode through puddles. But the most special addition was a small chrome nameplate mounted on the handlebars, engraved with elegant script. For Barbara Watson Stribling, the brave little girl who changed my life forever. With all my love, Papa Arthur. The birthday party was held in their backyard, with Barbara's classmates from her new school running around the swimming pool, playing on the elaborate playground equipment Arthur had installed, and enjoying the kind of celebration that every child deserves. Amanda stood beside Arthur, watching their daughter laugh with her friends, marveling at how far they had all come from that desperate morning when Barbara had tried to sell her bicycle. "Are you happy?" Arthur asked quietly, still sometimes needing reassurance that their love story was real and lasting. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," Amanda replied, squeezing his hand. "A year ago, I couldn't have imagined any of this. You didn't just save us, Arthur. You gave us a life beyond our wildest dreams." "No," Arthur said, pulling her closer and kissing her temple. "You and Barbara saved me. I was just existing before I met you both. Now I'm truly living for the first time in my life." When it came time for the gift presentation, Arthur wheeled out the restored bicycle, now gleaming like a jewel in the afternoon sunlight. A collective gasp went up from the party guests at the sight of the beautiful machine, but it was Barbara's reaction that Arthur would treasure for the rest of his life. She stared at the bicycle for a long moment, her small hands pressed to her mouth, her blue eyes filling with tears of pure joy. The bike looked like something from a fairy tale, every component perfect, every detail crafted with love and attention. "It's my bike," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "My pink bike that I sold to help Mommy, but it's even more beautiful than I remembered. Just like you and your mom made my life more beautiful than I ever imagined it could be," Arthur said softly as Barbara threw herself into his arms with such enthusiasm that he stumbled backward laughing. "You kept it safe for me," Barbara said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "You took care of my most special thing and made it perfect again. Just like you took care of my heart and made it perfect again," Arthur replied, holding her tight while Amanda wrapped her arms around both of them. "Can I ride it now, please?" Barbara begged, already climbing onto the bike before Arthur could answer. As he worked to adjust the seat height, Barbara had grown considerably since that morning almost a year ago when she had stood on the street corner. Arthur marveled at how much had changed in their lives. The bicycle that had once represented desperation and sacrifice now symbolized love, restoration, and new beginnings. Barbara wobbled slightly as she started to pedal, her muscle memory needing a moment to reawaken. But then she found her balance and began riding in confident circles around the patio. Her laughter rang out across the yard, pure and joyful and free, while the pink streamers fluttered from the handlebars like celebration banners, and the silk daisies bounced gently in their wicker basket. "Look, Papa Arthur. Look, Mommy," she called out as she gained speed and confidence. "I remember how to ride, and it's even better than before." Arthur felt Amanda's hand slip into his as they watched their daughter in every way that mattered, riding her beloved bicycle in the golden afternoon sunlight of their backyard. The transformation was complete, not just of the bicycle but of all their lives. As the party wound down and the last guest departed, the three of them remained in the backyard as the sun began to set over Fresno. painting the sky in shades of pink that perfectly matched Barbara's bicycle. She had finally stopped riding long enough to show Arthur and Amanda every detail of the restoration, her excitement bubbling over as she discovered each special touch he had added. "Papa Arthur," she said suddenly, using the name that had evolved naturally over the months. "Can I ask you something important?" "Of course, sweetheart. You can ask me anything." Barbara was quiet for a moment, carefully considering her words with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. "That day when you bought my bike from me, did you know we were going to become a family?" Arthur exchanged a look with Amanda, both of them remembering that desperate morning that had changed all their lives. "No, Barbara, I didn't know then. I just knew that you were a very special little girl who was trying to help her mommy, and I wanted to help too. But you kept my bike safe even when you didn't know me very well," Barbara observed. "And you visited us and helped Mommy get her job back and became my friend. That seems like family things to do." "You're right," Arthur said, struck by her wisdom. "I think maybe my heart knew we were going to be a family before my brain figured it out." Barbara nodded as if this made perfect sense to her. "I'm glad you bought my bike that day. If you hadn't stopped to help me, we might never have met you and learned that you needed a family, just like we needed a daddy." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they moved inside to their family room where Arthur helped Barbara carefully park her restored bicycle in the place of honor by the window. Tomorrow she would ride it to the park, show it off to her friends, and begin creating new memories with her treasured possession. But tonight, it stood as a beautiful reminder of how love could transform even the most difficult circumstances into something miraculous. Barbara curled up between Arthur and Amanda on their comfortable sofa, her head on Arthur's shoulder and her legs stretched across Amanda's lap. The adults exchanged looks of perfect contentment over her blonde head, both marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment of absolute peace and happiness. "Tell me the story again," Barbara requested sleepily, even though she had heard it dozens of times. "About the day you bought my bike and we became a family." So Arthur began the story that had become their family legend, the tale of a little girl brave enough to sacrifice her most precious possession for love, a mother strong enough to rebuild her life after betrayal, and a man wealthy enough to buy anything but wise enough to recognize that the most valuable things in life cannot be purchased. They can only be shared, cherished, and given freely from one heart to another. As Barbara's breathing grew slow and steady against his chest, Arthur continued the story in whispered tones, telling of how a pink bicycle had become the bridge between three lonely hearts, how love had grown in the most unexpected places, and how a family had been born not from blood or obligation, but from choice, commitment, and the courage to open their hearts to possibility. Amanda listened to Arthur's gentle voice telling their story, her own heart full of gratitude for the twists of fate that had brought them together. She thought about that terrible morning when Barbara had dragged her bicycle down the apartment stairs, how desperate and hopeless she had felt, how impossible it would have seemed that their darkest moment would lead to their greatest happiness. Outside their windows, Fresno slept peacefully under a canopy of stars, but inside their home, three hearts beat in perfect rhythm, synchronized by love and bound together by the unbreakable bonds of chosen family. The pink bicycle stood sentinel by the window, its chrome gleaming in the lamplight. A beautiful reminder that sometimes the things we let go of come back to us transformed, restored, and more precious than we ever dared to imagine. In the months that followed, their life together settled into the comfortable rhythms of a family that had found its perfect balance. Arthur discovered that success measured in quarterly reports and profit margins paled in comparison to the joy of Barbara's excited chatter about her school day, or the warmth of Amanda's smile when she welcomed him home each evening. He learned that the most important meetings were the ones held around their kitchen table, discussing Barbara's homework or planning weekend adventures. Amanda flourished in the security of Arthur's love and support, pursuing her MBA with renewed confidence, and watching Barbara thrive in ways that single motherhood had made difficult. She no longer lay awake at night worrying about rent money or grocery bills, but instead dreamed about the future they were building together. Perhaps more children, certainly more adventures, definitely more love than any one family should be lucky enough to possess. Barbara continued to be the heart of their household, her joy and innocence reminding both adults daily of what truly mattered in life. She excelled in school, made friends easily, and approached each day with the confidence of a child who knew without question that she was loved, wanted, and cherished by both her parents. On quiet Sunday mornings, Arthur would often find himself standing in their kitchen, watching Amanda teach Barbara to cook pancakes or help with an art project, and feeling overwhelmed by the abundance of his life. The mansion that had once felt like a beautiful prison now echoed with laughter, music, and the countless small sounds that make a house into a home. One evening in early autumn, as they sat together on their back patio, watching Barbara practice riding her bicycle in increasingly elaborate patterns around their yard, Amanda made an observation that would stay with Arthur forever. "You know what I love most about our story?" she said, her hand finding his as they watched their daughter navigate a particularly challenging figure-8 course she had created with traffic cones. "What's that?" Arthur asked, bringing her fingers to his lips for a gentle kiss. It started with Barbara willing to give up the things she loved most to help someone else. And that same generosity, that same love, is what brought us all together. She taught us both what it means to put family first, to sacrifice for love, to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. Arthur watched Barbara complete her course with a triumphant cheer, her blonde hair flying behind her as she pedaled, her laughter carrying on the evening breeze. She was the teacher and we were the students, he agreed. A 7-year-old girl taught a grown man how to love. "And now look at us," Amanda said, gesturing toward their beautiful home, their thriving daughter, their life that seemed almost too good to be true. "We're living proof that fairy tales can come true, that families can be created by love rather than just biology, that second chances can lead to first loves." As if sensing their attention, Barbara rode over to where they sat and came to a perfect stop in front of their chairs. "Want to see me ride with no hands?" she asked, already knowing the answer would be a concerned but loving, "Please be careful," from both adults. "Show us," Arthur said, "but stay where we can see you, and remember to use your helmet." As Barbara rode away to demonstrate her new skill, Arthur reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, he had been a man who measured his worth in dollars and business achievements. Now he measured it in bedtime stories read, soccer games attended, family dinners shared, and the countless small moments that make up a life well lived. The pink bicycle that had started it all continued to be Barbara's favorite possession, though now it represented not sacrifice and desperation but restoration and hope. Every time she rode it, Arthur was reminded of the morning that had changed all their lives when a little girl's courage had opened his heart to possibilities he had never imagined. As the seasons turned and their first year as a complete family gave way to their second, then their third, the story of the pink bicycle became family legend, told and retold at birthday parties and quiet moments, shared with new friends and passed down as the foundation story of how the Stribling Watson family came to be. Barbara grew taller and stronger, eventually outgrowing her beloved pink bicycle. But Arthur made sure it was carefully preserved in their garage, polished and maintained, ready for the day when perhaps another little girl in their family might need a bicycle of her own. Because by then, Arthur and Amanda had begun talking about the possibility of adding to their family, of giving Barbara the siblings she had begun requesting, of filling their home with even more love and laughter. But that is a story for another day. For now, it is enough to know that the pink bicycle with its wicker basket and dancing streamers continues to represent the miracle that can happen when desperate need meets generous love, when broken hearts find healing in unexpected places, and when 3 lonely people discover that together, they make a perfect family. The bicycle stands in its place of honor, a testament to the truth that the most beautiful stories often begin with the most difficult moments, that love can transform any situation, and that sometimes, when we're brave enough to give up what we think we need, we discover what we actually deserve, which is always, always more than we ever dared to dream possible. In the end, Arthur Stribling learned that he had been wrong about almost everything that mattered. Success wasn't measured in bank accounts or business achievements. Home wasn't a building, no matter how expensive or well-appointed. And family wasn't about blood relations or perfect circumstances. It was about showing up every single day with love and commitment and the willingness to put someone else's happiness before your own. Amanda Watson learned that she was stronger than she had ever imagined, that asking for help wasn't weakness but wisdom, and that love could come in forms she had never expected from directions she had never considered. She learned that single motherhood had been a chapter in her story, not the entire book, and that the best chapters were yet to be written. And Barbara Watson learned that being brave enough to help someone you love can change not just their life but your own. That families can be created in the most unexpected ways, and that sometimes the most precious things are the ones that come back to you transformed and more beautiful than they were before. As for the pink bicycle itself, it learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, that objects become treasures not because of their monetary value, but because of the love they represent, the memories they hold, and the stories they help create. It had been transformed from a simple child's toy into a symbol of sacrifice, love, restoration, and hope. And in the end, isn't that what all the best love stories really are? Tales of transformation, of people and things and circumstances made beautiful by love, of broken hearts made whole, of lonely lives made rich, and of ordinary moments made extraordinary by the simple act of caring more about someone else's happiness than your own. The pink bicycle continues to shine in the Stribling Watson garage, waiting for its next adventure, ready to carry new dreams and create new memories. Because the best stories, like the best bicycles, are built to last, designed to be passed down from one generation to the next, carrying with them all the love and hope and possibility that make life not just worth living, but worth celebrating. And if you listen carefully on quiet summer evenings in Fresno, you might still hear the echo of a little girl's laughter as she rides her pink bicycle through the streets of her neighborhood, not running from desperation anymore, but racing toward joy, carrying with her the knowledge that she is loved, wanted, and cherished beyond measure, which is, after all, the only thing that any of us really need to know. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.